Okay, everybody. Hello and welcome. We have the beautiful Alison Ramsey with me today, and it's kind of amusing because her audio is not yet working, and I don't know if she can see me yet either. So we're still figuring out a few technical difficulties, and I hope that can figure out, or we can figure that out. Um, because it was going to be absolutely amazing to be with her. Allison, can you hear me? Can you see me? Go ahead and try to open Zoom on your computer if you cannot yet. And just look at Zoom and see if you can see me. Can you hear me yet? Hello?
I can hear you. I can hear you and I can see you.
Fantastic. Okay, we made it. Awesome. I was kind of SOSing this now.
I love that you were just watching me like stare off into the distance. It's quite a vulnerable thing to have happen, to know that someone's been watching you and you didn't know.
Right? Oh my goodness. I didn't mean to, but you were there and I didn't know how to get your attention.
Luckily, I didn't like pick my nose or anything like that.
Yeah, she was just sitting there looking beautiful, everyone, and I was like, "Well, this is nice. I'm enjoying this." But
Oh, we're here now.
we are here. We're live. We're on. Yeah,
Yay.
it goes on automatically. So let me talk about a little bit why we're here. Allison really got my attention originally because during the last interview I gave, probably the last interview with Jillian, she really used her gift of sight and saw some things that were happening there and saw the energy that we were trying to create and that I really want to foster, and said some things that showed me that she has the gift of seership. And then I had her on later and we talked together and I saw she had the bluest eyes ever. She's like the most beautiful White Walker you've ever seen. So
Oh, thank you.
and so obviously there's gifts there that are connected to sight. And then we started talking more deeply and I was just profoundly impressed with her powerful ideas about ecology, about the world, about how to save the world in the few years left we have to do it, about relationships and connection and health and just kind of everything. So I said, well, can we talk? I have the feeling that I would love that. And I think a lot of other people would love that too. And she graciously consented. So with that, welcome Alison Ramsey.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, I'm glad we got this together. I mean, the last time we were planning this, I got allergies so bad and I kind of rubbed my eye too hard and the eye swelled up to like twice the size and turned yellow, and like it was really
Oh,
horrific.
wow.
It was really disgusting. So I'm glad that we've got it this time and that we can do this.
Me too. Yeah. And I'm glad your eye is okay now.
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you for your patience because it took us a while to get back to with everything going on to actually doing it.
Oh, and equally your patience with me. I think probably you've been more patient with me than I have with you. So thank you for that. And actually, this time feels really good compared to the other times. So, trust that it's all happening as it should be.
Yeah, I agree. This has been perfect timing because August is often one of my amazing months, but this August has already been more amazing than probably any other August. So many things are falling into place and connections and magic and happening, and I expect that this is another one of those. So it's great that we found today.
Awesome. Yeah, I love August as well because it means spring in the Southern Hemisphere. So, yeah, when it's just before spring and you're almost just like that bud that's just about to burst out of the ground or off the branch of the tree. Like, that's what I feel like.
Mm.
Like, burst of energy just about to come forth. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I don't think people know terribly much about you, some of us. So maybe talk a little bit where you are, how you got there, what you're doing in general.
Okay. Well, from my accent, my accent doesn't match the place that I live. So I'm Canadian. I grew up in Canada, but I moved to New Zealand when I was 24. On my 24th birthday, actually, I landed in New Zealand on the day. So I always remember my anniversary of being here. And I came because midway through my university degree in Canada, I moved in with an organic farmer and his partner just by accident, right? And I ended up eating in a different way and looking at food in a different way, and then therefore having an experience through cleaning my body with nutrient dense, low toxicity food, having an experience of what I would just call clarity. Just felt like all the gunk in my body left my body, and therefore I was able to access thoughts and feelings and sensitivities that I didn't have as good access to. I don't want to say that they weren't there at all, but they definitely became stronger and created a whole new awareness for me. And so it was such a profound change that by the time I finished my degree, which was in fine arts, so not in anything to do with health or ecology, I wanted to travel, and I really wanted to experience this relationship of being really close to the planet and growing food, and that relationship, all those different cycles and how they had a further effect on me, because I was already experiencing like these amazing effects and this transformation, which essentially is what it was. And I wanted to deepen that journey. And so I chose New Zealand because it has a reputation for being a very green country and a very beautiful country, which it is. And also it has a really great climate. You can grow a lot of things, and it's a very agriculturally based country. So it was kind of a no-brainer. So I only intended to come for a year, and I spent a year volunteering on organic farms around the country of every description, like orchards and small-scale lifestyle blocks to farms involving stock animals, everything you can imagine. And I ended up staying 15 more years. So I've been here 16 years. And in that time, like, so much has happened, of course, as it would in 15 years. But I've ended up going from kind of an arts background into a health background more professionally. And, what I'm called, like what my paper says, is that I'm a functional medicine health coach. And the majority of people are like, what does that mean? In functional medicine, it's just it's really the new paradigm of medicine. So it's root cause medicine. That means instead of looking at your symptoms and treating the symptoms, we look at why. Why do you feel this way? Why have you got depression? Why do you have an autoimmune condition? Not like, let's treat the autoimmune condition, like let's treat the fatigue, let's treat the digestive discomfort, but like, why? And it looks at the whole person, so mind, body, spirit. So it's not just looking at your physiology, it's looking at everything that affects this body being, this creature that moves through the world. And it has to be, because it's kind of more of an accepted form of medicine. It is backed by evidence and scientific studies. So, but what's cool about that right now is that being someone who has followed science and followed a lot of spiritual practices, is that now our scientific equipment is getting sensitive enough to prove what we already intuitively knew about spirit and about how we interact on a spiritual level. So it's really cool to kind of be able to see that happening, and really validating for me, because I've always liked both, and I've always kind of felt like I've couldn't bring the two camps together. It's like we've got the science camp and they're like, ooh, that's a little woo-woo. And then we've got the spiritual camp and they're like, all science is BS, So I've always felt like in the middle of those two places, and now they're all coming together, which is really beautiful.
Very nice. Question that I have for you. First of all, I don't know if we talked about this the first time, but what did you study in fine arts?
I studied theater.
Oh, okay. You're a theater major. Okay. Well, I studied music, so we did.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I've been a lot of places too to land where I am, but that's interesting that we both have fine arts degrees. That's cool.
Yeah.
And when you talk about, you visited these organic farmers, you lived with them, you ate with them, you had these transformations. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those transformations were, or what you noticed becoming more refined and more focused, as you cleansed your body with these true foods or real foods?
Hmm. Yeah, great question. Um, well, what I noticed at first was the discomfort, and
Discomfort.
that's something.
So not a
Yeah,
not yeah, okay. Uh-huh.
yeah. With any kind of detoxification, there is a degree of discomfort or unpleasantness or pain. And maybe we can talk about that today too, because pain is something I've been really interested in lately.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, just a little bookmark maybe for later.
Sure.
But yeah, that was the first thing I noticed is that even though inherently like it felt right, like I was really attracted to what was happening, and maybe that has a little bit to do with my path, but there was discomfort, and that's not unusual for anyone who changes their diet and cleans up their diet and cleans out their body in any way.
Right.
But then after that, I mean, and that carried on for a while. Like that was part too. I don't want to say that they weren't there at all. They definitely became stronger.
Sorry, and little audio things going on here. I just need to make sure.
Yeah,
test, but keep going. Yeah.
It's very distracting hearing your own voice.
It is. It's horrible. I'm sorry. It just
like,
froze here, but it's still broadcasting. But I wasn't sure, so anyway, I tested it. But yeah, we're good. All right, keep going.
Cool. And then I guess I noticed. It's been a while now. It was clarity is the word.
Clarity.
So it was better energy, but it wasn't just a physical thing. There were physical elements for sure, but it felt like the only way I can describe it is like a cloud or like this gray muck, this like sleepiness. It came off me, and like colors were brighter. I felt like my intuition was clearer. I could see life in a new way. That sounds profound. It was profound as that. Like, it's like the way the trees looked was different. The way people looked was different. My whole way of relating to the world around me felt different. And I fundamentally changed as a person in so many ways. And that, was an unraveling over years, of course. But the thing that kept me going was really just, it was like I was given access to things that I didn't have access to before that point. And I just finished reading a book actually called Grow New Body by Alberto Villoldo. He's a South American shamanic doctor. And it was very validating for me because in this book he talks about cellular detoxification and brain detoxification and actually getting your body to operate in a certain way that when you're on like the standard American diet, or you have a lot of carbohydrates and sugars and toxins in your diet, that you don't actually get access to certain areas of your brain, and you're on a cellular level, they're not communicating as well as they could be. And he basically described my experience in this book. So it was really wonderful for me to be able to read that. So like, it's not just me. I just want the listeners to know, like, everybody has a chance to kind of have an experience similar to this. So, but yeah, it was like, I fundamentally became different. My whole path became different. My mission became different. The way I related in the world became different. Like, my values changed, and I was given access to what I can only say is like to like spirit in a new way.
Wow. So, there's so many questions I have about all of that. I was taking notes the whole time. You wouldn't believe normally that you could just change your diet and that so much would shift, and that the standard American diet, it's been by degrees getting worse and worse over 100 years or several hundred years. I don't know exactly, but I think I read something like there's something like 10% of the nutrients in food as opposed to 50 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of levels to this. So I just also want to make sure that people understand it's not just a matter of like eating more kale or going vegan or whatever it is. Like it's just so much more to understand than that.
Is it possible, for you to just say, do these 5 things, or is it like takes years of study to change into that, or what can you possibly do, right?
Well, certainly it doesn't take years of study at all. Like that's just me because it just became my life passion. So I dove really deep. But people always ask me, what's the healthiest way to eat? And that's probably the best way to answer that question. And from what I understand, from my lens and from what I've gathered over, and this is a 20-year path, like even it's probably a 22-year path now, of basically almost being obsessed with like what creates health and how to access that. What I think the healthiest way for people to eat is a local, organic, omnivorous, and I know that'll upset a few people, diet. And the closer that you can get to your food being as close to you and as natural to you as possible, the better. So, and that would also include wild foods. And I can say why if you like. But that would be the healthiest diet, in my opinion, my humble opinion.
I love it. I love that you're back. This is awesome. And I love controversy. So let's take a shot at the vegans here, and you can tell
okay.
me.
All right.
I put all the controversy on my page. I love it. So tell us why omnivorous, which means I guess you're not excluding meat, you're not excluding eggs, you're not excluding all that stuff. Why not?
And you're not excluding plants. So
I'm not excluding plants. Okay.
Okay. So first of all, I have just like the full disclaimer is that I have nothing against veganism if people want to choose that path. That can be a powerful path. In my experience, it's powerful to a point, and then the power ends. And what I can gather from that is that it's an amazing way to detoxify. But at some point, your body also needs to build.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
Fats and proteins are building blocks for the body. And I guess I also have tried every diet. So just in case, like, I've only followed, if people think I've only followed a certain way of eating, like I've done every diet and I have been a vegan. I only lasted a month. And it really was not the right diet for me, but I was vegetarian for 6 years. So I have had the experience of a plant-based diet. I haven't been on a plant-based diet for, I want to say 15 years, or maybe 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
So a while I've been back on an animal diet, but I'm very particular about the kinds of animals that I eat. And we can talk about that too. And it really comes down to energy, but, so why don't I think veganism is the best path? So I also frame health from an anthropological viewpoint or an evolutionary biological viewpoint, because in all my searching and trying to figure out like what was our most natural diet, because you study any animal and we're an animal, that's part of what we are. Of course, there's so much more to it, but I would argue there's so much more to every animal on the earth. Everything has a consciousness. Everything is got an awareness. And I think we underestimate our animal friends and our plant friends in how much awareness that they have. But if you looked at any animal, you'd say, well, like, what's their natural diet? You'd look at, like, what is their natural habitat? What is, like, their mating behaviors? What are their social behaviors? Like, and especially for, like, zoos or animal sanctuaries, like, people want to understand, like, what is their natural diet, right? So that's what I wanted to understand, was like, well, what is our natural diet? Do we have a natural diet? Like, we're a species, we're an animal. what is our natural diet? And so what made the most sense to me was that looking at the history and evolution of humans and our species, our natural diet is a seasonal, local, omnivorous diet. And that exists throughout time. In fact, vegetarianism was born in India with the monks who had an awareness that cholesterol is, and that's been vindicated, like cholesterol we understand now is a good thing. It's also the building block of hormones, especially our sex hormones. And so when you have cholesterol in your diet, you're making a lot of healthy sex hormones. And so the monks obviously wanted to dampen that down a little bit, right? So they excluded a lot of animal products, not all of them, but some of them. So like if you look at any hunting and gathering society, to my knowledge, I don't know of any vegan hunting and gathering society. When you get closer to the equator and fruits and nuts are more available, there's definitely less eating of like flesh and the whole animal and more eating of like fruits and nuts and insects. But was like what the landscape provided them. The further and further you get away from the equator, when you look at like the Inuit, they're almost exclusively on animal flesh with a tiny, tiny percentage of plant material. And they're some of like the healthiest and most robust and most just like resilient people on the earth, right? Cancer free, heart disease free, like, you know, it's all about the quality of what you're eating. And so with those studies, which weren't like a 5-minute study, that's studies over years, and with the studies on my own body, and then with working in the arena of health and watching, I know so many people who are recovering vegans, so many. And that's not to say that it's not possible to do well. I haven't seen many cases of that. And what I can conclude from that is like a diet that's so difficult to sustain that you need to sustain with supplementation, to me, isn't a natural diet. It's an idea. It's an experiment. It's maybe a possibility for the future if we can get technology right and supplementation right, but it's not our natural diet. And I'm like a nature nerd. And so I want to do what nature has designed for me to do. Like, that's just my lens. That's just like what lights me up. And so that's what I follow. And then also just like my own experience of going back on an animal diet after being off one for 6 years, and just how much better my health got. Of course, it really matters what kind of animals and plants that you're eating. And I don't know if you want to pause there and ask something else, if you want me to dive into like that aspect, because that's also really important.
This is very valuable for me. I'm selfishly imbibing all this. So yeah, keep going. I like this.
Okay. Yeah, good. So yeah, quality. And so of course, like I'm a very compassionate person, and the reason I became vegetarian, which many of us do, is because of the way animals are treated in agriculture. And no argument there. It's horrific in large scale farming and factory farming. Like, that's criminal. It's criminal. There's no argument there from me and probably the majority. Well, at least a good percentage of meat eaters. So, and that's not just like cruelty. That's also, energetics are an important piece of this conversation and what we eat. And that's like scientifically backed too by something called microRNA. So if anyone is nerdy enough to want to explore that, like our food does have microRNA that affects our microRNA and affects our genetic expression, and that information they take in from their environment, and it actually changes the way that animal or plant is. And so if you get an animal who's never seen the sun, who's never eaten its natural diet, so a lot of like the cows and chickens and stuff are on feedlots and pigs, and they're eating grains, which is not their natural diet. They're in cages, they're stressed, they're separated from their babies, like they're often physically harmed, like it's horrible. and they grow for a certain period of time, and then we eat that. And currently we have an epidemic of stress and depression in the world. And I argue that a lot of that has to do with the type of food that we're eating, and whatever microRNA information in there is around stress and stress hormones in the animals. And then we consume those animals and plants, and we can talk about that too. And we're putting that in our body, and on an energetic level, that's having an effect. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, science can even prove that now. It's not some hippie woo-woo stuff. And we're always looking at the animals, and that's another thing that I kind of had to come to terms with. Is like, well, what about the plants? Like, why are we not thinking about the plants? Because plants are put into monoculture, and monoculture is just like means like one big field of the same thing. So one big field of wheat or soy or corn, any of those big crops, which is not natural for them. And you'd never see that in nature. Nature never creates monoculture. Nature creates diversity, because diversity is health. And then they're grown in depleted soils, so they're not getting the nutrients. So they're starving, like they're a starving creature in a vulnerable to disease place. So the reason why nature creates diversity is because when you have monoculture, you've got one huge crop of something altogether. And so when you get one pest in that crop, it absolutely thrives. You know, if it's a mold or an insect or whatever, it's like, it doesn't just have one apple tree to like hang out on. It's got like 10 acres of apple trees. And so it just proliferates and creates disease. So the plant is now not in its natural environment. It's starving. It's diseased. It's being sprayed with chemicals, which is cruel in itself. A lot of chemicals, because when you have monoculture, you've got a vulnerable plant. That to me is a very stressful environment for a creature that we then eat. And so that plant is fundamentally nutritionally depleted on so many levels because of what it's exposed to and because of the quality of the soil that it's grown in. And then it's also another stress thing that we eat. And then let's talk about like how it's processed on top of that. Like, has it been heat treated? Has it been ground up? Has it been shipped from China? Has it, there's so many levels, which is why I say a local, organic, seasonal, omnivorous diet. It's like if you go to your farmer's market and they're growing in the area, your body's getting fresh food that's been grown, hopefully, like certified organic farmers are supposed to bring soil health and all that stuff into their practices. And you'd know if they didn't, because the food wouldn't be as good. So there's that contrast. And so you get a lot of people, and maybe it's just like a lack of awareness or a lack of understanding, but a lot of vegetarians and vegans who think that there's no cruelty in their diet. And there's actually a lot of cruelty. And let's not forget, like, the swaths of fertile land that are cut down to grow the soy and the corn and the wheat and the whatever grains that are staples of the diet, and the quinoa that comes from Peru that the little Peruvian farmer is completely exploited for, and the maca in the superfood smoothies that, again, like, takes years to grow. Maca is like a 3-year process or something, and then the farmers get like $1 a kilo and charge, I don't know, $100 a kilo to sell it to other companies. Like, there's so much cruelty in your food and across plants and animals. And the only way that a vegan diet is plausible is because we also have airplanes. And so if I were to go out into the local bush today and be told to survive as a vegan, I could not. I would die. But if I was told to go out and survive as a respectful animal eater, I would thrive. Based on my biology. And yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
I could listen to you forever. I love this. I love you. You are the person now. I'm even getting even more in our second conversation than our first. Um, you're the closest person who thinks the way I think about this stuff. I mean, I haven't studied it in the depth you have, but you think about, and I didn't think about cruelty to plants. But one thing I had the theory that I wondered if people get very, you talk about the energetics and the emotions. I wonder if people get paranoid when they're smoking pot because the people who are creating it and harvesting it illegally, they're filled with paranoia and fear or the cops coming, whatever. So I always thought, I wonder if that paranoia is going into the plant and you're smoking it and you're getting paranoid, that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of levels that you can start looking at this, and I think it was a little bit, too woo woo in the past to kind of go there, but now it's being more and more acceptable to go there, and I think it's a really important part of the conversation. Is like we're so aware of other people's energy around us, like vampiric energy and whatever, spending time with certain types of people and stuff, and we rarely think about the energetics of the food that we're eating. We might think about like the quality, like, am I eating enough broccoli? Am I eating too much red meat? But there's a lot of levels to go beyond that. And it has a profound effect on how we feel and how we move through the world and what we have access to and our own energetic bodies.
My dad, my grandpa, I mean, my grandparents both lived in their 90s. My dad does nothing to watch his health at all. And he's now having some issues in the 70s. But the thing is, they tested him and they looked at him for heart disease and things. The one thing that he did is he ate red meat like crazy. He ate bloody steaks all the time. And something in it seemed to like save him from a lot of issues because he's just surprisingly fit, even though he never pays attention and he eats Oreos and everything else. But he eats a lot of eats a lot of red meat, and that's like the only thing that I'm trying to figure out. How come he's healthy still, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so red meat is very nutrient dense from like just a nutritional analysis, and that there's a lot of arguments out there to counter that, but also it has to do with our physiology. So large animals like gorillas and cows may be able to extract protein from plants, but they have a huge like digestive tract with like 4 stomachs and really long intestines and all this fermentation that goes on. And our digestive tract is like vastly more simple than that. And I'm not saying that there's not benefit to plants. Of course there are. Like plants are very medicinal and they have a lot of alkaloids that affect us and affect like us on a genetic level, and they're important to have in your diet. But arguably so is meat. And if you can get access to wild meat, like a wild animal, then I think that's the most humane, the most natural, and the most nutritious way to consume meat, especially if you know who's catching it. And also, 2 more things about that. Because of my studies into like anthropology, I really appreciate a lot of like indigenous practices. And one thing that I thought was particularly beautiful was the way many indigenous cultures really respected the animals that offered their life for them to consume. And they didn't take any of that for granted. Like part of the meat culture now too is that we just eat muscle meat and we forget about the rest when there's so much more to utilize and honor. But also they not only thanked the spirits of the animals, but they believed that they took on qualities of the animal when they consumed it, right?
Really? Wow. Okay.
So like the energy of the bear or the energy of the deer. And again, it's like bringing it back into this conversation of energetics. Like I believe that's true. It's like a cow isn't even a natural animal. It's like a hybrid of an old animal called an Orrock, which is a lot more like fierce and large and wild. And we tamed the Orrock and genetically mutated it enough that we got something really docile like a cow. So arguably, like Mother Nature didn't even create a cow. It's a similar process to chickens, and a very similar process to most of the fruit and vegetables that we eat today as well. They are hybrids of a wild plant that is probably growing as a weed in your garden. That's vastly more nutrient dense, and we're still much more adapted to the medicine in that plant, but we eat the ones that have been hybridized because they've been hybridized to be like brighter and sweeter and more appealing to our palate than the wild progenitor of that plant or animal. So yeah, so I just wanted to throw that in there again. Like, there are ways to have an animal and a plant diet that are humane and make sense and that we're adapted to and that create health. Like, I feel like a lot of meat eaters experience a lot of guilt because there's so much talk about a plant-based diet and how it's the way forward and it's what creates health, and like the horrors of factory farming. And those horrors are true, but like, you don't have to participate in that. You can do it a different way, and to feel guilt and shame for eating in a way that makes your body feel good is, I just think, is utter BS, and it just creates more problems than anything else, especially in spiritual communities. Like, when I coach people and I ask that question, like, are you a vegetarian, are you vegan? When they tell me they're a meat eater, I can hear like a drop in their voice, like somehow they, you know, and that sometimes they'll say, oh, I tried not to eat it, but it didn't really work for me. And so, yeah, that's another whole other thing, but I'm not like that, obviously.
Two more things. When I had quite a spiritual awakening in 2011, and I felt like avoiding people totally. And after that was my goal. So I started researching what it would be like, how you could live if you left society, if you did the Christopher McCandless thing, not that his story went well, but and tried to live. And that's kind of what I got is what you said, like even in Utah, southern Utah, we're talking about desert, there's very few plants and everything. But what you could do is you could kind of live from like trapping jackrabbits and things, and you could survive that way, and it would probably work. You could just go and live off the land, and you could survive that way if you really needed to.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, right? So that's what you're saying, like you could do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to bring in like be a little bit like of my own kind of shit disturber here too, and I feel like all of this is kind of reinventing and creating itself right now. Like, I feel like collective consciousness right now is just changing so fast, and we're gonna have to figure out new and innovative ways to live on the planet, or we're not gonna be alive, you know, anymore. Because all signs, like, we're in a, and maybe this is a good segue into the pain piece, but we're in a mass extinction right now. And that's like plant species and animal species, but also just from somebody in the arena of health, it's like there is so much sickness and disease right now. Like, it's unbelievable. Chronic disease rates in our children are like so high. And each generation, it gets more pronounced, and infertility rates are exceedingly high. And these point to a number of things. So I feel like we're on the cusp of like a great transformation, and I don't know what it's going to look like on the other side. Like, the nature nerd in me wants to say that we have to go back to like the way we were designed to interact with the planet, which is kind of like similar to some of the ways we talked about already. We didn't talk about the spiritual piece too, which I think is important, because health isn't just about what you eat, but part of me wants that to be the result, but there might be something that nobody knows about yet, about how we're going to live and eat and relate in the future, if, you know, no matter what happens in the future. But yeah, there's a lot of pain right now on the planet, in humanity, and I want to say that like there's pain in the environment. I can't say that that's true for sure, but like when whales are washing up with like tons of plastic inside their bodies, and creatures are dying because of the amount of chemical residue like running through the systems, and you know, species are dying out, and there's only 5 of this and 3 of those and whatever it is, like there's got to be an element of pain there. And then I'm also not saying that that's necessarily bad, because I feel like pain is a catalyst for transformation.
If I'm going to, I love that, because number one, kink, BDSM, and pain. But like, there was a time when I was doing my coaching stuff and I felt guilty about, or I wanted to avoid pain for all of my clients. And I guess it's like a parent. You can't avoid pain for your children. You can't like keep them completely safe all the time. And so I had to abandon that and feel like it's okay for them to experience pain. And sometimes it's okay for me to inflict pain, and pointing out things that are uncomfortable is painful. Seeing things about yourself, and so embracing pain as a path to transformation is a good thing. Or what are your thoughts about pain, or where have you been going with it recently?
Yeah, like that's a big piece of it. And it's not like I didn't have an awareness of that before. Of course I did. But just like becoming more aware of like all the ways in which we avoid pain and how culturally acceptable they are, and even encouraged that they are. It's like we numb it. And I'm not just talking about like addicts who numb their pain with alcohol. We numb it you go to a doctor for a pain and you get a drug to stop the pain, right? But that pain is a messenger.
Right.
It's giving you information. It's telling you about something, and we're meant to be listening to that pain, not shutting it up so we can carry on and ignore it, right?
Right.
And then I was thinking about the pain of childbirth and the pain of death, and they're the like ultimate kind of transformations. Like they create the ultimate transformation into rebirth, right? There's a transformation and then there is birth after that transformation. And reflecting back on my own childbirths, I have 2 children, and both of them, I didn't have any pain relief, no interventions or anything. And especially the second one, because I think at the second time I knew what to expect, so I was a bit more present for it. That it was really after the intensity of the beginning of labor and adapting to the pain. It was after that I experienced an incredible otherworldly experience that every woman, I believe, can experience. And there's not even really any language to describe that experience. It's just like the most wild, primal, otherworldly, like spiritual, like just, and to get to that, you have to get past the intensity of the pain. You can't, I don't know if anyone studied this, or like, this is just me reflecting on my own experience. It was after like you adapt, because there's that initial like, oh my God, overwhelming pain. And once you let your body produce all like the dopamine and whatever it is to help you adapt to the experience, then you get like basically your high, and you're in like almost like a portal to your next life when you become a mother. And if I was drugged up, and this is also not to shame or make wrong anyone who chose drugs and had to have interventions, of course those things happen, and that's totally okay. But I wonder how much they would happen if we had the right narratives, the right support, the right culture around birth for women, like if we would need that, if we had been prepared in ritualistic ways and in, with more wisdom. But anyway, yeah, it was like through the pain that came this incredible transformation. And I feel like that it's that way. It's like we can look at so many levels of that. But yeah, so I was saying that we numb it and then we also project it. So you're carrying around this pain, and instead of dealing with it, like we maintain like that victim mentality, and then we project it out onto the world everywhere we possibly can, so we don't have to metabolize it and let it have its way with us, so that we can then transform into something else from that experience. And then also we bypass it. And so just all like the ways that we avoid pain, it's been quite fascinating to me. And the narratives around pain, and like what would the world be like if we had a different narrative around pain? but also there's like our physiology is involved in that too, because if we touch something hot, we like immediately retract from it, and that's a survival mechanism. And I'm not suggesting like people should go out and like let people punch them in the face or abuse them or whatever. Like it's a little bit of a different side of the spectrum, but just like what is good about our pain, and how can we, it's like almost taboo. Like we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to share about it. We don't know what to say when people share it with us. Like we get really uncomfortable. And then we give people drugs. You got pain, like let's just rewire your neural networks and you'll be fine. When really they just maybe need to cry for a few weeks, and maybe need someone to listen to them, and maybe need some love and some good food and some time in nature, and like that's it. They don't need 18 years of antidepressants. I'm going into all the controversy, Ryan.
I mean, I'm feeling that in my body. I'm feeling pains act up when you say that. I'm feeling things being triggered. I mean, when you said like they need, I feel some sadness around that. Good food, love, nature. And I'm like, oh, in which ways am I not getting those things? And then am I ignoring my pain? And wow, that just really hit me what you said.
Okay.
And
yeah.
I'm somebody, I'm like meditating, I'm like go into the pain, feel it. Okay, where is it at? Like I'm somebody who does that a lot, but you're showing me different aspects of pain that my loneliness, my fear, these things, these emotional states, and kind of some ways in which I'm like, yeah, actually I need this, actually I need that. That would be great. That would be wonderful. I've been building things into my world and my life to do more of all of the kind of things that you're talking about. But I still have a long way to go to just get, I don't know, that natural life that you're talking about, to deal with the pain of existence, which is the other side of the pleasure, which is my world and my study and my exploration is pleasure. And you can't get into pleasure very deeply at all without seeing pain is a big part of pleasure.
Yes.
And they're connected.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And so it's so totally true. Like every end of every spectrum, if you're going to talk about independence, you need to talk about need, right? Like you're going to talk about masculine, you have to talk about feminine, pleasure and pain. Yeah. Thank you for like being so real with me in that moment. It's beautiful. And there's obviously some gifts there for you to kind of explore in your discomfort, right? Yeah. And again, like everything is the spectrum. So I realize that like we're all also having our own individual experience of life, and I'm just speaking from my own individual lens, and people will either resonate or they won't. So I'm not trying to set up like, and the reason that I'm clarifying this is because I've had this response before. It's like, oh, it's easy for you. You like created this like life, and you live in New Zealand, and it's so beautiful, and you eat organic food and whatever. It's like, I'm not trying to set up like this elitist natural lifestyle. Like I still have Wi-Fi and I love chocolate, and my kids go to school. They go to alternative schools. They go to school. So like, but I engineered that for myself. I used to live in the biggest, dirtiest city in Canada, and I used to smoke cigarettes, and I used to drink lots of booze, and so this was a path that I went on. And I guess if anyone's wanting to explore this way of being in the world, or like getting more time in nature, or those sorts of things, it's like, it's all a gradient. So just take a step and see how it feels, right? Yeah.
And
I just wanted to add that.
That's yeah, you can't do it all in one day. I mean, I remember the first time, I remember going to a bunch of doctors to fix things like chronic sinus infections when I was in my 18, 19, 20, and getting no help at all, and then finding some alternative people that actually did have some solutions and some help for me. But then I remember a guy came and he gave a presentation about water. And I was like, what is there to know about water? But then he started going into it, and he tested my water, and he showed all this black crap coming out of it when he put the tester in, and then he measured, and it has 300 parts per million. And what are those 300 parts per million? Are they, leftover? When you talk about infertility, they could be leftover birth control pills that were not filtered out by the systems. They could be chemicals and antibiotics, and they could be, radioactive particulates, and, people's hairspray and everything else that's in the water that I'm, and
Yeah.
and like runoff from, like you said, chemical fertilizers, pesticides, all of these things are just in the groundwater, in our water. We're drinking it. And he said, well, the interesting thing is, and this was in Germany, they had a limit of, I think it was 500 ppm of like foreign substances in your water. And then they sell you this nonsense about, well, you're getting your minerals through it. And he told us, well, that was nonsense. But anyway,
Yeah.
but anyway,
Crazy.
and then Germany, basically all the public water places, they couldn't keep that level anymore, and they were exceeding 500. So what they did was they just changed the law and made it 2000 ppm. And so all of a sudden it's okay to have way more crap in your water, and I was like, oh my gosh, if that's true with water, what about the food? And you've been saying it. You've been saying all these ways that it's all been, over the years, people have been saying, how can we make it even cheaper? How can we make it even cheaper? How can we do it even faster? How can we do it even more efficiently? How can we save money? And you taste it. And I mean, I'm just amazed. It's like people believe the advertising. I wrote this on your wall, and you mentioned this, like you go into a supermarket, you don't smell anything.
Yeah.
You're
wow, like that doesn't even make sense, right?
And people eat tomatoes that taste like nothing, and strawberries, and they look like strawberries, but they don't taste like strawberries. And like my dad had a garden growing up. Man, we used to eat that stuff completely different. It had flavor. It was so yummy. It was, and you're like, why do we even go to the store? What are stores for? Like, but somehow people buy it, people eat it, and you're like, no wonder you're so big. Is because you're eating all this stuff and there's nothing in it for you. It's just there's no even flavor. There's not even and the senses is so important around that. So
exactly.
I mean, that was part of my study of Tantra, was valuable, really going into the sensual experience of things and slowly, and try take one grape and take 30 seconds or a minute to eat it and smell it, and then the texture and the flavor, and you're like, wow, and then I just want to say one more thing. This is so exciting. I'm loving this because this is the foundation of everything. It really is. Before you get to the stuff that I've studied more, but like I wander through this park every day, and all summer long, I've been, just as an experiment, and I don't know why I've been doing this, but I've just been picking dandelions and eating them right on the spot, right? Just like, and
Yay.
and it's through this park, so it's natural, and it's like this nature restoration area. So I hope there's no pesticides and fertilizers. Although I did notice they have sprinklers there, so they are watering it, I guess. But which I like. Okay, does nature water stuff? Do they have sprinklers in nature? But okay, whatever. I'll take it. But yeah, I've just been eating these dandelions and trying to feel into my energy and feeling like, okay, is there something in there for me? Is this, are there minerals here? I've just been, and it's just been an experiment and interesting. I'm not sure that I've really noticed like dramatic difference or whatever, but I think we have this idea that this is a really bitter, yucky thing, kind of from nature compared to what we're used to, like all these hybridized things you said. But there's something in it that also feels hearty and nourishing and on some level.
That's really beautiful. I love that. And what you're doing, like, first of all, having that awareness is awesome. And there's a curiosity in that awareness, right? It's like, well, let's check out this dandelion, like see what this is all about. So there's like, there's a, like, I want to say from a biological lens, there's like a genetic memory in there somehow. There's an instinct in there that is telling you something, that there's a message in there. And then also, despite the bitter flavor, there's also like, this feels like something that could actually be good for me, good for my body. And again, that's true. And the bitterness in plants is an indication of medicinal qualities. So they're called alkaloids. And these alkaloids activate us on an epigenetic level. So our epigenome is the science of the expression of genes. And so what the study of epigenetics has found is that just because you have certain genes doesn't mean they're going to express themselves. So you might have the gene for breast cancer, which a lot of women are naturally very concerned about, but that doesn't mean that gene is going to be turned on. And the the science of epigenetics is whether like those genes get turned on or not. And what they've discovered affects the turning on of a gene is your lifestyle. So your diet, your exercise, your sleep, your stress, your perception of love and fear, all affect that epigenetic expression. And particularly with food, is these bitter alkaloids have proven to be quite powerful in a healthy genetic expression at the epigenetic level. And what has happened is, of course, we've bred, like we said, all the bitterness out of our food, because sweet is very rare in nature. So we have a natural inclination towards sweet, because if you go out into the bush, you don't see fields of peach trees and apples and berries all like growing in abundance. Like, that's not how nature works. We get very, like, a wild fruit is small, it's bitter, it's like, you know, it's rare, it's seasonal. You might find it 1 month out of the whole year. So we took this like urge for sweetness and we made it like widely available for us. And then, of course, that then leads into how we have this epidemic of diabetes and obesity and stuff, because we're getting way too many sweet carbohydrates in our diet, and we're not biologically adapted for that. So we bred the bitterness out, and we lost our taste for bitterness. And then so now we have a medicine deficiency. And so now we have to take pharmaceuticals, which are bitter, by the way, and are modeled on a lot of these bitter alkaloids that people have found in jungles and stuff like that. So if we just included a small amount of wild plants or bitter greens into our diet, we're getting a lot more medicine. And also on another level, it's like when we eat a wild animal, that wild animal's diet is typically wild plants. And a lot of people don't like wild meat because it has that gamey, they say the gamey taste, right? That kind of, it has a bitter quality to it. So that's the medicine that they're getting from the wild plants that are going into their bodies. And then we then get that medicine from them as well. So cows and pigs and chickens in feedlots are eating grains, which fatten them up very, very quickly, and also fatten us up very, very quickly as well, and are devoid of medicine.
Yeah, I love venison or whatever, you know, wild caught fish, whatever. That's, if I can eat all that, I do. I was just
Awesome.
I was just surprised. I mean, basically entire oceans have been fished out, and now we have fish farming, and that's in like the last 10, 15 years, and even that, you know, is just horrific. And they're feeding you know, color pellets to salmon so that they're not gray and that they're pink, and
I know.
and Phil, yeah, I mean, this is, yeah, it causes me pain too to even talk about this because I love fish so much. But you know, when I was young, fish was completely different than it is now, and now they're dumping. Now they're getting like, because they're so close together, they're getting all these diseases. So then they're dumping like antibiotics into the water, and it's everything is denatured, huh?
It's madness.
It's madness. Yeah, it's insanity.
Yeah.
And you said like we're coming back to that space, that way of doing things, or looking at things a little bit like we have no choice, because like, as you said, we're all going to die otherwise. So we have to be able to see things from a multi-disciplinary right brain, left brain perspective, somehow become into balance if it's going to continue, if life is going to continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think regenerative is the word of the future. It's like, how can we regenerate things? How can we coexist and have a healthy interdependent relationship with the natural world and our co-species? And there is this beautiful grand design to it all. And, you know, everything is either's purpose is to be food or consume food and create other benefits through that consumption, through population control. I wonder if we should link in the comments after this. There's this beautiful video. I can't remember who it was done by, but it's about when wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone National Park. Did you see that?
I've heard about it, yeah, but yeah, say more about it.
Yeah, so it's like basically like a 5-minute documentation of like what happened when predators were introduced into Yellowstone National Park, because a lot of the rivers were losing their direction and they were eroding at the riverbank and changing the landscape, and then certain species were getting out of control, and so they introduced a predator to see if and they used to be natural to Yellowstone. I can't remember if they said why they were moved on or not, but nobody likes wolves, so maybe in the past they were the population was affected by people relocating them or shooting them. But anyway, they were reintroduced, and the amazing things that were the downstream from that reintroduction. Yeah, they started to kill deer and rabbits and stuff, but through that one mechanism, how much life sprung from that. And, that is the grand design that is here. And that's always what I come back to, no matter where I veer off and what direction, because I have so many little side passions, and I'm always like wanting to learn, and I'm always questioning myself. So yeah, feel free to question everything that I say, because I do. But I'm always taken back to nature, and at the root of everything is, I feel, our connection or lack thereof of the natural world is at the root of everything, even our spiritual awareness. And I know a lot of spiritual teachers who would disagree. And again, maybe I just don't have access to certain information, but from my lens, like, that's again and again what I come back to. And when I talk about health, again, it's like not just whether your body is running smoothly. It's like all aspects, mind, body, spirit. Like, are you living on purpose? How are your relationships? Like, how do you move in the world? Like, all those things really, really matter to me.
So, do you have a few more minutes, because it's been an hour already?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Do you want to start talking about connection a little bit? Because I remember that was a theme, and you're going into it again, and that's where definitely our worlds collide, and that's what I'm interested in. So, yeah, say some more about connection, if you want.
Was there something in particular about what we talked about last that really stood out for you?
Well, I think the important thing that really hit me was that we are in relationship to nature, and we're in relationship to the world. There's either this consumptive view of it, or, what is your view of the relationship to the natural world? Either we're supposed to dominate it, or take it over, or bring it under control, or manage it. And I mean, everything that, or can we somehow dance with it? Can we somehow communicate with it? Can we somehow, like you said, that the native peoples did, that they have this relationship to the earth, to the natural world? Because what you're saying is everyone takes that into their marriages. They take it into their relationship with their children. We're supposed to dominate the children, and we tell them how to live, and we make the rules, and we make sure they don't get out of line, and all, like, same thing with our partners. If our partner is looking at somebody else, you can't do that. You can't have those feelings. You can't express, we're bringing this relationship to nature. I don't know if it comes from the family to nature, from nature to the family and society and all this, but we're all terribly lonely and isolated, and our relationships are not that good in general. And so the relationship to the natural world, I mean, I'm just saying what you said, which was so brilliant last time. So this isn't, but these are mirrors. And I thought it was so fascinating that you brought that up. And yeah, I don't know if you have a lot more to say about that, but that was a lot in itself that was very beautiful last time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, for remembering, and for sharing that. Like, sometimes I'm just so in the moment that I come out of it and I'm like, oh, did I say all those things?
Yeah.
I guess what was coming up for me then when you were saying that is that, yeah, first of all, like 7 billion people on the planet, and everyone's just so goddamn lonely. Like, whew, that is huge. That's a huge thing for us to look at. And another thing was like, well, first of all, we are nature. We are it. And I think that divorce, that disconnection, that severing is at the root of it's like the root cause. It's like we forgot, or we were, you know, or dare I say religion like beat us out of it or whatever. Like something happened along the track of time. And if you look at indigenous cultures, like they had that intact, and they knew somehow intuitively like that they were stewards. And I feel like, you know, at the top of the food chain, like that is a role that is there for us to embody, right? And this divorce or disconnection or severing or whatever you want to call it has given us the permission to use nature and use each other in the way that we have. And I think it's caused also a fundamental confusion in us. I think as children, you know, children still have this like beautiful natural curiosity to the natural world, you know, to like just being around animals, to watching a flower like blossom, to seeing food grow on trees, to, you know, getting into, like, I just know when I take my kids to the beach or into the bush, like they come alive. And so I think that's intact. So I think it's something that kind of dissolves over time or is nurtured or is not nurtured in us. And once we kind of, I want to say, forget about it, and we're able to forget about the relationship of like consuming this thing and it becoming what we are, or the importance of having an intimate connection with nature on whatever level, whether you're going to be a gardener or whether you're going to be someone who swims in the river and cleans up the bank at the end of the day, or whether you're going to be a hunter or a herbalist, or however you're going to create intimacy in your life with nature. Like that is where you can start to restore that connection. That's where you can start to gain its medicine on every level, like on a mind, body, spirit level. Because we can all agree that like if we go to our cottage by the lake, or we go on a tropical holiday, whatever it is, like that feels good. And it's not just because we're relaxing, it's because we're getting contact with nature, and nature is feeding our spirits. And the presence of the trees and the quietness and the lack of distractions is all bringing us back to the truth of what we are and to the clarity within. And nature is so much like an anchor point. And it's like, as soon as the further we move away from that, the kind of more caught up in distractions we get, and the more we're able, like you were describing so beautifully, like use and abuse our bodies, use and abuse each other, use and abuse nature. And there's like so many like little, I feel like I'm not doing it justice the way I'm describing it, but there's so many also little like offshoots of that. But like essentially I feel like it's this severing, or this amnesia, or this conditioning away from being in contact with nature. I mean, even just like putting your bare feet on the ground and grounding, like takes away all the electrical pollution in our body, and brings us back into like a state of electrical balance, which then creates health. And getting the sun on your skin, like sunlight, like we photosynthesize the sunlight, like how perfect a design. And vitamin D is created through this photosynthesis, and that's responsible for over 3,000 different functions in our body, including skin cancer prevention. Like it's just such a perfect design. It's so beautiful and so intricate and so like exquisite. And it really is this, like, maybe it was the Industrial Revolution, I don't know, it's like this sweeping away from that connection that has caused us, like, yeah, I guess it's kind of like an amnesia. And that, I feel like it's an inherent confusion that's probably subconscious, that we don't even know it's there, that creates this, I want to say, like, unrest in us that permeates everything, and then causes us to be able to make choices that are counter to our health. again and again and again. Does that make sense? That was, I feel like that was a rant that went everywhere, but maybe you could ground it a little bit for me, right?
Two stories came up for me from that. And that is like when I was in Germany, some tourists came back from Africa and they said, they're so happy. We're going to these tribes and they're so joyful and they're so happy. And I was like, well, why don't you go live that way then? Why don't you like take something from that? You know, you go back to your job that you hate and commute for 2 hours a day and burn, oil and all these things. But you realize they're really happy. You saw it, you experienced it, but you just leave it and you see how they live with nature in harmony. And what was the other thing that I thought? Oh yeah, there was an article that I read the other day and it says the island where people forget to die. And basically the story is there was a man from Greece. He gets terminal cancer. He's told he's going to be dead in a couple months. He says, okay, well, he's in New York City, though. He's living in the United States. So he says, okay, I'm going to go live back in the old island where I grew up as a kid in Greece. And he goes back and he just starts tilling the soil and playing in the garden and sitting at the beach and waits to die. And he doesn't. In fact, he totally recovers. The cancer's gone. He feels completely better, And for me, this is just natural. This is intuitive. You just feel it. Like you said, we go there, we feel it, we know it. And yet it's like, but I'm going to do something about that later, or I'm going to live that way later, or I'm going to do that on vacation for 2 weeks a year. Instead of saying, no, let's erase the board. Let's start over. Let's see how we can create that right now. And like you said, maybe there's ways that were from the past. Maybe it's permaculture. I just listened to an amazing thing about how basically the entire Amazon is a food forest. And that was all planted. Yeah. And basically that's how the United States was when the white people showed up too, which is you could walk through and just grab this fruit and grab, and it was all set up that way, right? But know that you want to make money on the apples, so you get rid of anything that's native, and then you build the orchards, and then, and I'm just like, this is insanity. And like you said, we don't have that much longer. And if I may say so, you are the revolutionary, or one of the revolutionaries, or the leaders who I see with a clarity of message that can actually begin to either reintegrate in old ways or begin to invent some new ones around all of this. So you've really inspired me with this. You've inspired me with it more this time even than you did last time. Yeah, the world that you create, I think I would enjoy being in that world.
Well, thank you. Yeah, what a beautiful thing to say. And yeah, just thank you so much.
And not only is it an intellectual gift from your amazing understanding of things, it's a spiritual and a heart-based flow that comes out of you because of your connection with all these things and your expression. So it just kind of, I feel like being around you would rub off. Like I would feel better. I would like start doing things better. I just like, I want more of your energy. So I just want to encourage you and invite you to bring it more and speak more and share more, because just seeing you here with me now has made me like think of many things that I can do and change and want to shift and explore more and ask more questions. And so yeah, this is beautiful for me. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. And I really appreciate the way that you're holding space for all sorts of different people to share their gifts in the world. And, what you just said is really like the purpose of relationship, right? Is for all of us to come and open up and share things that are deep within us in order to create a better way of being in the world. And yeah, that's beautiful.
I want to invite everybody who watches this, please learn from Alison, study her, hang around her, give her money, do anything. Do anything to support her work or vibe with her and learn from her and experience her. If people want to work with you, learn from you, connect to you, how can they do that?
Well, if you're on Facebook, feel free to just message me. I'm always open to having conversations and connecting with new people. So obviously people watching this on Facebook, that's a really great way. Or you can go to my website, which is Alison Ramsey, ramsay.co.nz, and message me from there on my contact page. Right. Yeah, just don't be shy.
Very sweet offer. Thank you. And that's .co.nz for you Americans who don't know what that means. So
sorry, I've been Kiwi-ized a little bit. 16 years here and you start to
I
become
know.
a little Kiwi.
I lived in Germany for 15 years. I lived in England for a year. I know that happened to me too. So I can translate a little bit still. And thank you. Any final feelings, ideas, anything you want to share before we let you go?
Just maybe an invitation for people to start exploring an intimate moment with nature. And that might be getting next to a stream and giving yourself some time, like give yourself an hour and sit next to the stream and do your best to become present, because that can take some time with the way that our brains have been conditioned to distraction in modern times. And just watch and notice what arises. Or maybe it's just getting into a sunny patch in the grass and taking off your shoes and lying there and doing the exact same thing. Wherever you can get close to somewhere that isn't noisy, if possible. I mean, if you can only just go to a city park, that works too. Get under a beautiful tree. But if you can get somewhere where there's the least amount of distraction as possible, and just get still and get quiet and take time and notice what happens and what arises. And yeah, that would be my invitation to people.
I do this every day. It has changed my life. It's been a practice over the last couple of years to go, wherever, even if it's in a city park, like you said, and spend at least, 20, 30 minutes if I can, longer if possible. Thank you. That's a beautiful practice. Everyone do that. It's free. It's easy. Go do that. It's going to change your life. It's going to be a beautiful first step. And then there's more things you can implement. Thank you so much, Alison, for today.
Thank you so much. It's been so fun. It's great to connect with you.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to diving in more with you deeper sometime. So I will be bugging you about that post-haste.
Okay.
And
sounds good.
Good luck and all the best with everything that you're working on.
Thank you, Ryan. We will be in touch.
All right. And enjoying. All right. Take care.
You too.